Super, great. Well, Carolyn, are you all set to go?
Yes, we are. Go right ahead.
Super, thank you. All right, well, it's 1:01 p.m. And so I will call to order the June 21st, 2021 meeting of the Albemarle County Architectural Review Board. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Ordinance 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. A quorum is present. Architectural Review Board members present electronically are Frank Hancock, Chris Henningsen, Frank Stoner, and myself, Dave Vanderwerf. Opportunities for public access to this meeting are posted on the county's website at the county calendar. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. This online meeting is a public record and subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. For all speakers, when it's your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. And for everyone participating today, please keep your microphone muted unless it's your turn to speak. For applicants making presentations, note that the presentation is limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among your team members as you see fit. Carolyn will let us know when the 15 minutes are up. Next item is disclosures. Do any board members have anything to disclose today?
No.
No, I don't.
No.
Nor do I. Thank you. All right, next section is public comment. Carolyn, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on items not on the agenda?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. There are no items on the consent agenda, so we will go to the regular review. There is one regular review item today that will be presented by Margaret Malachevsky from the Planning Division of Community Development. Margaret, will you share with us ARB 2021-51?
Yes. Are you able to see the PowerPoint slide? Great.
Yes, thank you.
Make one more adjustment here. Okay, this is a proposal to expand the existing Crozet Animal Wellness Center with an addition on the front of the existing building, and also to expand parking and to undertake related site improvements. The property is located at 1100 Crozet Avenue. It's on the west side of the street, and it's a short distance south of both Jarman's Gap Road and Tabor Street. A special use permit was approved early this year to allow the expansion of the existing veterinary clinic. The current plan shows phase one of the existing, phase one of the proposed expansion. A future phase would include a new building close to the street. The issues we identified in the staff report were all related to either landscaping or lighting. We identified no issues related to the architectural design of the addition. Visibility of the existing building is reduced due to the distance from the street and the curve in the road, though some existing trees that currently provide screening are proposed to be removed. The architectural forms and features that are proposed in the addition are consistent in character and scale with the nearby buildings. The landscaping issues identified in the staff report include an insufficient number of trees along the frontage, along the south side of the driveway, and along the east and south sides of the parking lot. The lighting issues we identified are related to the color temperature of the fixtures and various notes on the plan. Note that proposed light levels do reach a maximum of 19.6 foot candles, and we recommended that the applicant consider reducing those levels given the character of the surrounding area. We've listed those recommendations in the staff report as preliminary comments to be addressed in the final site plan submittal to the ARB. However, given the limited nature of the comments, the ARB may feel that the application does not need to return for a full review. In that case, your action could be a vote for approval with conditions. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Frank Hancock, do you have any questions?
Thanks, Margaret. I kind of missed the last thing you said, that maybe if I paraphrase that, if we're okay with everything, we could move to a certificate of appropriateness. Is that okay?
Yeah.
That was the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Frank Stoner.
Margaret, I guess I'm wondering about the landscaping requirements, particularly those that would be impacted by the phase 2 development. And I'm wondering is that the reason why they're not currently showing the additional landscaping? Is there an intent, I guess, to build phase 2? And if so, could we enforce those requirements as part of phase 2?
Some of those questions may be better answered by the applicant. Since there is a phase 2 in the conceptual plans, I assume that there's still a plan to move forward with that. I think probably it would be better to ask the applicant to comment on what planting might be still be able to be done with phase 1, knowing that phase 2 is coming.
I guess from a policy standpoint, is there any, because the facility is so far off the road, is there any provision in the existing policy that would reduce the amount of planting needed on the frontage, for example, because of that, or is it?
Your guidelines are guidelines, and so you can take those sorts of characteristics or features into consideration when you're applying the guidelines. I think there is limited visibility of the existing building right now, but some of that is due to trees that are to be removed for the future construction.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Chris?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions either. Thank you, Margaret. I'd like to invite the applicant to make their presentation.
Hi, I'm Mike Wittig with Blue Line, the architect, and I will share my screen. So as Ms. Malashevsky indicated, it's a single-story structure currently, and we'll be expanding approximately a 3,000 square foot footprint, 2 stories, to house an expanding business for a veterinary clinic. Be adding lobby area and exam rooms and converting the existing building into more back of the house space, treatment areas, expanded surgery, and some kenneling opportunities. Part of what we dealt with in terms of exterior design, dealing with regulations for the Architectural Review Board, is that it sits primarily in a residential district. So looking at context, we know that we're a business in that residential aspect, and we wanted to try to strike a hybrid, approach to remain in context with the building and still stay true to the surrounding neighbors. So try to find a kind of a hybrid approach in terms of materials and massing and so forth. So we've created two main masses to the building. The larger one is the lobby area, the main entrance. So it's created with a little more height, a little more prominence to indicate that that is the entrance. We have a porch along the outside at the owner's request for warmer weather days when our clients and patients come in. They can sit on the porch and wait outside, and perhaps it's a friendlier environment for them rather than be around some other animals for certain animals. The longer wing is primarily where exam rooms and office space and so forth are. Tried to limit the height, just create some difference between the 2 wings, making the wing with the exam room a little lower. Again, the larger mass with the lobby a little more prominent. As far as exterior materials go, a lot of the neighboring houses and so forth have brick foundation bases or masonry foundations with siding above. We've tried to maintain that general aesthetic as well. With again, the surrounding context, the houses are a little older, so we're trying to maintain some traditional aspects of those houses. As far as the wing, instead of having a long uninterrupted wing, we've tried to break the facade up with this vertical element that breaks the masonry and so forth to try to give it a little interest and not have it look so uniform. I'll cycle through some of the views that we have for the building. This is from the northeast, and then the northwest, and then coming back around to the southwest, following up with a few perspective views. As far as landscaping goes, Justin Shimp, I believe, is on the call. I don't know if Justin, would you like to address site concerns or site aspects?
Hello, everyone. Yes, Justin Shimp. I could address a few of those items. Margaret, could you bring up that nice little exhibit you had showing the elements of concern, the landscaping? I can explain a couple of those. We have some flexibility, but there was some logic to what we did, and we can walk through that and see what the board thinks. Okay, yes. So first of all, the lighting comments, those are just things we need to clean up. We'll have to talk to the owner about exactly how bright they want the frontage. We may have it a little brighter than is necessary, but we'll address all those, not an issue at all. And then on the landscaping, this is part of a future phase project. I don't know what the current timing is. Maybe Mike would know that exactly on sort of when phase 2 might occur, if that's a year or two or longer out. But is a few conflicts potentially with that. On the front, we could put a couple more trees there, but there are some existing there's sycamore trees that are going to become fairly sizable. So there's actually, if you look at the screen, there's a cluster of 3 up at the kind of north corner, and there's a couple more along the frontage. So there's really technically 3 or 4 along there existing. I think 5 would be required. So, I mean, we can put 2 more trees in there that may become one of these situations where in the future, to satisfy the zoning for the downtown Crozet district, we have to put a future building directly up on that street, which might make a challenge for landscaping, but that may be a problem for down the road. So I mean, I think if we need to plant 2 more trees for the time being, we're okay with that. Saying the trees on the left side of the travelway, that's fine. We can add a couple trees there. Where on the south side, that arrow there, the problem there is there's a big utility storm drain there. So we could not plant trees in that location. That's why they're not there. And we can't really move our parking lot, obviously working with an existing entrance, an existing building, we're constrained a bit. So on that one, we'd have to ask the board to sort of use your discretion from the guidelines and say, well, this circumstance, we just can't make that work. Existing utilities, existing road, existing buildings, it's just a different kind of site. And then on the edge of the parking lot, there's a large holly tree there. There are some other trees there now. That's where obviously an expanded parking lot would go that direction in the future. So those trees would be taken out at some point. But again, that could be more than a couple of years from now. We can't say that exactly what the timing is, unless Mike knows more than I do of recent. But that's why we left those off, is that with the landscaping from the frontage, and then the existing rather little triangles, I think it's a big holly bush or tree. We felt like additional landscaping there wasn't needed. I don't know they're opposed to putting in a tree or 2, but it's also, they would be taken out at some point when it's expanded and given the setback from the entrance corridor, and we could provide the shrubs. It just didn't seem necessary. So again, that's one where we prefer not to install new trees there, only because we don't think they'll add too much and they'll be taken out. But if we need to, we will. And then the others, some we can comply with, and if we can get the board just to understand the issue with the utility and nix that, I think otherwise we're good.
Thank you. Any other presentation for the applicant?
No.
We'll invite my colleagues if they have any questions. Frank Stoner.
Thanks, Dade. I guess the only question is, and it's really more curiosity than anything else, is it looks like you guys have elected to use dark trim for the most part on everything except the front columns. And I'm just wondering why you chose to make the columns white and everything else black.
It's a great point. And I'll be honest, I don't have the best answer for that. We just maybe more of an idea of using the contrasting color to accentuate that portion, since it is the main entrance.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks. I don't have any other questions, Dade.
Sorry, my internet may be a little bit unstable, but if I'm still being heard, Frank Hancock.
I can hear you, Dade. I do not have any questions.
Thank you, Chris.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize. My connection dropped out as you were answering, Mike, the question about trim. I had a question about that too. I know frequently trim traditionally here is a lighter color than the building. Is that something you would give consideration to, or did?
Yes, and we're open to that fact. To do lighter trim, have no objections to that. The answer that I gave was leaving the white columns just to kind of emphasize the main entry, just as a contrasting color. But if to be in context, white trim is probably a little more in line with what is in the neighboring buildings. I think the owner has a desire for perhaps a little more modern approach, so that was the reasoning for the dark trim. But again, if light trim is something that would be more desirable, we have no objection.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's see, and then I appreciate the use of sort of a traditional house domestic form to relate to the local condition. I guess frequently in sort of development over time, the wings will be secondary to the original structure, and I guess that narrative is evident here, sort of to the extent the long building with the exam rooms is lower. Would it be possible for the house massing to be proud of that facade, or?
We've looked at that, and the fact we're pretty tight for space with the parking lot, and with the desire to have the porch on the front of the building is in large part what drove that decision. I get what you're saying, and seeing that being proud of the wing would make it a little more prominent and be in line more with some of the traditional aspects. Justin, I don't know if that's we talked about that prior in coordination meetings. I don't know if that would be something that would be possible given site constraints. And really, I believe, if I recall correctly, the fact that the grade is kind of the driving factor on that. As we move farther from the building, we're getting deeper into the ground. Would that be fair, Justin?
That's right. Yeah, we really don't want to push the parking lot any further up the hill than we have it. I mean, nothing's impossible, certainly, but there is a purpose for the layout. There's also this, idea of future expansion, and that requires, more space, and pushing that up the hill is something that we would like to avoid. We're trying to get a little more landscaping space in front of the building, which we would sacrifice a little of that if we pushed that out. So I don't want to say it's impossible. I think it's undesirable from a site layout standpoint, site grading. And I like, it was also, spatially, whether you need more room into that part of the building or not, a question too, I think. But I certainly prefer to keep the site layout as it is, working with the constraints we have.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that additional background. And I think given the location on site, and the likelihood of a frontage building in the future, it's not a critical issue for me. Last question was, Justin, in terms of that drain line, can you clarify, is that an existing one? And is that an easement or a private drain line, or is that one that's going in for the property that creates the planting conflict at the south?
It's an existing easement that actually the county owns
Okay,
for
I
the
see.
Crozet streetscape. So yeah, it's
Okay.
a pretty sizable pipe and it's been
Okay.
there and there's not much we can do about it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I don't have any other questions. Carolyn, are there any members of the public wishing to comment?
No, there are not.
Thank you. We'll go into discussion. Chris, would you start it off?
Sure, yeah. I did not have any concerns with the building. I think it's successful kind of application of the guidelines, and I like how the mass is broken up to try and bring it down to that residential scale that the surroundings have. My tendency would be to be a little lenient on the landscaping requirements for two reasons. One, because of the setback from the road, and secondly, because of the possibility of a phase 2 that's going to more directly address the street. I'm more inclined to let it go as proposed, but obviously I'm willing to go either way on it. But as far as the building itself, I didn't have any concerns. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Chris. Frank Stoner.
Data, I don't have any real concerns either. I would probably echo Chris's sentiments with regard to the landscaping. I think if they can plant a couple more trees out front, that'd be great, but I don't see much sense in planting trees that, if there's a good chance those trees will have to come out. And if it doesn't really have much impact on the visibility of the structure. In terms of the architecture, to me, it feels like a little bit of a mixed metaphor. It's traditional forms. I'm kind of with you. The trim feels a little bit awkward and dark, but I also understand the applicant's desire to create something that feels a little more contemporary. To your point, I wonder if you could break up some of that mass or address your concern with regard to the prominence of the primary facade, which is very sort of residential in size and scale. Maybe changing the color of the siding on that piece, just to create, I guess, that sense that things were added over time, but the primary form kind of maintains its integrity. But not, I would say that's in the category of a suggestion, not something I'm going to fall on my sword over.
Thank you very much, Frank. Frank Hancock.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Mike. I agree with my colleagues on the architecture and kind of what's in the staff report. And I appreciate the kind of explanation behind your design thinking and kind of what you were setting out to do. I think with the kind of exaggerated roof and with the front canopy and that bump out all in the main mass maybe kind of overcompensates a little bit or allows for the fact that that secondary mass is the one that's further out. So I kind of think that's okay. I think those elements maybe give it that prominence. I think so architecturally, I think it's appropriate contextually, material wise. I think all that. I think the white columns, I think that fits in. So I don't have any issues with that. The landscaping, I do think there's pretty big mass of plantings that are going to be removed that really block the view now to the existing building. And I think, you know, having some plantings along the frontage side of that parking lot would be important. I understand the constraint on the eastern side, and I think maybe plantings on the ends, kind of the islands, could maybe do the job there. But I think some large deciduous trees or something to kind of break up that, you know, I think you're going to be able to see the whole extent of this building from the corridor. So I think I agree with staff's comment of adding the trees along the parking side that faces the entrance corridor. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. And yeah, I think like my colleagues, I think I'm inclined to leniency for the majority of the landscape conditions. I appreciate Frank's concern about the appearance to the corridor, and I think would share his thought that it makes sense to include plantings at the east side of the parking to be sure that in the interim, the building is somewhat screened. Again, appreciate the applicant's additional background on the siding and the massing. And I think, you know, while it would be more in line with the typical development for the massing to adjust, I don't have any objection to it in this condition and situation. And appreciate the applicant's openness to considering other trim colors. And again, I think I'd put that in the category of considering. I think in addition to being maybe more traditional, it might make the roof somewhat less massive in terms of the treatment of the cornice. So, but certainly open and appreciate the client being interested in finding contemporary ways to express those building traditions. With that, why don't we turn to reviewing the staff recommendations?
I just realized I might have had my cardinal directions wrong for the parking lot, but I might have referred to the east wrong, but I guess the constrained condition is the south edge where the pipe is. So that's where I think I would be willing to concede that trees are not required. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. No, and I'm sorry if I misspoke cardinally, but yes, yeah. Got it.
I've got the comments that were in the staff report on the screen. I've added number 8 in red, consider lighter trim colors for the building. The 2 that I've highlighted in green are the recommendations about the trees. 6 talks about the south side of the driveway. 7 large trees along the east and south sides of the parking lot. So it sounds like there were some mixed comments there. Not sure what you want to do with 6 and 7.
Great. So if Frank, to your point about the south, did that apply to all of these conditions at the south, or are there, and because am I correct that the drainage pipe that Justin identified is in conflict with all of those at the south?
I think so. Looking at number 6, I would be okay to keep that. That's along the driveway coming in, correct?
Right.
And there are no constraints there with utilities or anything. In number 7, I think we would strike the south side of the parking lot. Is that correct? That's where that pipe runs between the parking lot and the property line.
Okay.
But those are just my thoughts. I know we had some other, I know Chris and Frank were okay with striking, so I'm fine to discuss.
I think you had a good point about the existing plantings that are being taken out. So, you know, I don't have a problem with something being added to the east side of the parking to help screen that.
Can I just clarify what we're the exact location of the trees we're talking about on the east side, I guess. There are trees up on Crozet Avenue. It looked like there were a couple additional trees, right, Margaret? And then some additional planting immediately east of the parking lot. Is it?
My understanding, and these additional trees would be kind of immediately adjacent to the parking lot. Is that correct?
Right, so the recommendation is to add trees immediately along the east side of the parking lot. That's the street side of the parking lot. And then to add trees along, much closer to the street to bring the planting there and to meet what the guidelines call for. So that's 2 large shade trees at the street frontage, and then additional large trees along the east side of the parking lot.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering whether we need both of those or whether it's an either or. I guess the ones immediately adjacent to the parking lot were the ones that Justin was saying they would have problems with.
I was like, with the future expansion, they would need to come out.
That's it.
And I think, that's sensible to me. I guess to Frank Hancock's point, I since it's sort of indefinite when that other development may happen, I think, it sounds like the applicant's willing to add those 2 trees, and certainly it would mean that the facade is somewhat screened if for some reason that future development is delayed.
That's fine. I'm okay with it.
Okay. Well, good. And is anyone ready to make a motion or anything else? Added?
So I have the wording for the 2 different actions you can take here.
Yes, yeah. And
If you don't feel like you need it to come back to you again, and then if you do want to see it again, you would just be providing comments for the next review, in which case you wouldn't have to make a motion. So I think the question is, do you all want to see this back again with those changes, or are you satisfied to have staff review revisions that you make?
yeah, personally, I would be comfortable with staff review, but how about others?
Yeah, I for one would be fine with a staff review.
Just sorry, go ahead, Frank.
Final colors. Did they submit actual color samples or?
No.
No, we don't.
Margaret, we would be approving the preliminary site plan. Would the architecture come back for a certificate of appropriateness, or are you saying that would be handled administratively?
A final site plan submittal would still be needed. The architecture would still be required to come in with that again. So if anything big changed or anything out of the ordinary was showing, we could still bring it back to you. The material and color samples would be required with that submittal. And again, if that's something you all want to see, we can make that happen, still without full ARB review. Whatever, let us know what your concern is, and we can figure out what to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good with proceeding, through this route with the preliminary site plan, and then only if anything, major changes that it comes back. So thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval of the preliminary site plan for ARB 2021-51 Crozet Animal Wellness with the conditions listed in the staff report amended as follows. Edit item number 7 to strike the words "and south." And add item number 8, consider lighter trim colors for the building.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Carolyn, would you call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the applicant. All right. Next item today, we don't have any work session. So there's one other business item for discussion, a status update on the entrance corridor guidelines. Margaret, will you provide that update?
Sure. So I can share, let me share my screen again. Let's see. So at our last meeting, we decided that the next step would be to move forward with Route 151 and coming up with a format to bring all the information. Well, let me back up. So a couple meetings ago, we came up with the outline of all the information, the different types of information that we thought should be included in each of these one-pager documents. And then at our last meeting, we decided we'd try and work through Route 151, pulling all those different pieces of information together from the PowerPoint presentation that Frank did, and see how that would progress. So I put together this PowerPoint sort of template to see if it would work, if it would help. And I'll just run through this quickly. And everyone can see the PowerPoint? Yeah, good. Okay. So I was just trying to make up pages for each so that everyone could pull the information from the presentations that I already put together, and just running through the outline that we had all reviewed. So we talked about each one of these one pages needing a map of the corridor, defining the extent of the segment. So these are the maps that were in Frank's original presentation. So I just plopped those in. We talked about having a very brief statement about the history of the corridor. I think this is something that staff will need to provide. And so I put a little blurb in here about Route 151, just saying it was established in 1990, talk about the extents of it, and noting that it falls within the Greenwood-Acton National Register District. Then a series of a few slides here that would provide a place to put the images of the significant historic sites that are within the corridor. What we're talking about here, we said we should have a photo, we should have the construction date, and a statement about the significance. That wasn't all totally available in the presentation, but there's this is just sort of a template. So just pulling what I could to show how it might work, and a couple other blank slides there for other significant historic sites. And we said we wanted historic use patterns. Wasn't really sure from the presentation that I didn't find anything really easily to pick out, but that's something that that's in the outline, and we'd want to sort of work through that. Also, elements of orderly and attractive development, predominant landscape characteristics, which had that item had a number of sort of subsections to it. One being natural landscape features and characteristic vegetation. So I pulled this image out of Frank's presentation, talking about rolling terrain and mountain views beyond. Another item there dealing with landscape features and their characteristics, sort of the three or four board fences that align the perimeters of the properties. It seemed to be an important item there. Patterns of organized site development layout. We would need images for that, images for visual order and common harmonizing elements, images of integrated buildings within the environment. Now we get to architectural characteristics with images showing scale and form and materials and colors. And almost at the end, features of pre-entrance corridor development to avoid. There weren't, I'm not sure if there were any in Frank's presentation or not. There might be some discussion that might need to go on there to decide which is which. And then a list of ARB approved development was an item we talked about near the end of the discussion about including, and that's something that staff will work on to put that together for each one. So I don't know, Frank, do you want to, I know you didn't have as much time as you wanted to get to this, but did you have an opportunity to look through it a little bit or have any comments?
I did, yeah. No, I did, and I mean, I think the information in our outline is important. I guess the anxiety I was having as I considered the materials and research that would be needed to kind of fill in each one of those is that you could end up with a small book particularly for the larger corridors where you have lots of architectural precedents and the corridor's long and the character changes. And so I thought just a conversation amongst us about how, you know, how far do we want to go with it? And can we identify sort of critical elements that could be summarized on a page, and maybe there's an appendix that then could be referred to. I don't know. It felt like potentially a lot of images to help illustrate whatever characteristics we're talking about, or just keeping track of significant historic sites on some corridors could involve, you know, many images. So would love to just have a conversation with the rest of the board about, you know, kind of where to go with this. 151 is not so much of a problem because they're, you know, one, it's a 2-mile corridor. Two, there's almost no significantly historic architectural features. So it would be relatively easy under this format, but I'm afraid like 250 could be, you know, a deep hole.
You know, I think, Frank, yeah, I agree. It's definitely a lot to gather. I think if we think of 250 as breaking it down into segments, I think they probably become as manageable as 151. But as we then contemplate the larger project of the overall counting, it does suggest that it's, you know, quite a lot. I guess in some ways, would it be fair to say that this might be the appendix, and where by populating this, we would be creating the resources that staff would then condense into the one pager? Is that the thought,
Yes.
Margaret?
Yes, that is the thought.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate, Margaret, as well. You're creating this format, highlighting the different elements to be looking for. But I don't know, Frank and Chris, for everyone, to the extent that we're either volunteering ourselves or not for it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my feeling is it seems like a lot, and I think you know, generally more information is better. But, you know, using 151 as an example, you know, a lot of the criteria is just not applicable to that corridor, and you know, it is a 2-mile corridor that doesn't really have too much on it. So I think maybe we need to come up with a very condensed um, you know, a literal one pager and maybe work backwards and more granular to more like what we have here to consider. And you know, some of the corridors, I guess 151 being a prime example, like would just need a one pager basically. So, but I think, you know, what you did is really good in terms of, you know, providing as much information as we possibly can for an applicant. But I do share the concern about the amount of kind of research that it would take to generate all that and it be accurate and in-depth enough to actually be useful to somebody.
Does the applicant see this PowerPoint? Does that become a tool or a resource, or is the goal at the end of this project that we have the one pagers for each corridor and that's kind
Yeah,
of a resource?
yeah, I just used the PowerPoint program as a tool to make a template to pull the information together. My thought was then I would be working with another planner here to take the information from this format and put it into the one pager, into the one page format that is yet to be created.
Gotcha. Yeah, because there's still a fair amount to, you know, present for us to present. I mean, I haven't done any of my corridors yet, my assigned corridors.
Well, that's true. My concern is I'd like to get sort of through. I'd like to get one done so that you all don't waste time doing stuff that we realize it just isn't necessary.
Yeah. Margaret, can you go back to the outline at the front? So I think what I can do is try to get this filled out as best I can for 151. And then, Margaret, I guess you guys could take that, sort of condense it in whatever fashion feels appropriate. We could review it again. And just in the process of condensing, you may come to other conclusions about
Right.
how we need to do this. So why don't I'll do that and I'll have it ready for the next meeting, or I can have it ready in advance of that, send it over to you. In fact, I'll plan on having it done by the end of the week.
Okay.
And then you guys, hopefully, would that give you enough time, Margaret, to kind of condense it in, try to condense it into a one pager? I think if we're going to go to the trouble to fill out this PowerPoint for the various corridors, just to save effort on your part, maybe to Frank Hancock's point, maybe you just take the PowerPoint and it becomes the appendix. And you just have the one pager and people can refer back to the PowerPoint if they need to.
Sure.
Just trying to find a way to simplify.
Yeah, I think
I guess
it's fine that the template works, then there's no reason not to have it available for other people to look at, sure.
I wonder, as we just walked through 151, for example, when you historic use patterns is pretty easy. I don't know, that could be defined in a narrative format, I assume.
Let's see. last. Let's see, which one is that? That's,
So that's just the, I mean, we can stay on here for a minute.
okay.
Key elements of orderly and attractive development that contribute to unity and coherence. Do you see that as a narrative as well? Some of these I wouldn't be sure how to answer, I guess. And I'm struggling.
Well, I was imagining that we would be able to find an image for everything. It might need, some of the images might need more text than others to accompany them.
Like, yeah, I guess design landscape features and their characteristics. Would that be, yeah, I guess, any thoughts you have, Margaret, about what photographs you'd be looking for to reflect these various characteristics would help?
Yeah, well, I think in this example, I put the board fence in under design landscape features. I suppose if you had a property that had that created a berm along the street and landscaped that might fall into that. If there were, I don't know, maybe like if we were looking at 29 North, it might be you know, your very regular alternating trees with a row of shrubs along the parking lot. That would be a pretty standard design landscape feature on that commercial corridor. I don't know if that helps.
Great, and I think if ultimately, you know, there are a few blanks remaining, you know, that will be all right. Just I think gathering all we can. And then Frank, thank you for trying this out in sort of a first pass. I think, you know, based on what you find in this next run through, I think as a possible way forward, we could maybe divide up 250 West into the various segments and then take it on, maybe take five of those segments, I think, out of the maybe 10 that are there, and learn some more, and then gradually perfect this tool. Great. Well, Margaret, thank you for this outline. Frank, thank you also for all your work trying it out, and look forward to taking the next steps together in our next meeting. Anything else on this before we move to the last business item?
Thank you all for continuing to work on it. I appreciate your input.
Well, and thank you, Margaret. Yeah, appreciate it. All right, our last item is to adopt the minutes of the June 7th meeting. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to adopt.
Is there a second?
A second.
Carolyn, call the vote.
All right, Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 6th, just after the July 4th holiday. Who is planning to be present? I will be.
I'll be here.
I will be.
Me too.
Great. Super. Looks like we'll have a quorum. Any further business before we adjourn?
I did end up watching the video and will add my voice opinion to the fact that I think the virtual meeting is a good format moving forward. I don't know if I did not do the survey, unfortunately. I meant to do that and missed that. But for the record, I will add that I think it's a good format for our meetings.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Frank. I agree. It's been quite effective and efficient from my perspective. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time today. Our meeting is adjourned until our next meeting on July 6th.
If,
Very